even if they've been trained, they just weren't as good as people like Audie Murphy from Texas. And that culture is dying. And, I mean, just in New York, they had shooting clubs. In Manhattan, they had shooting clubs for the young people. And they are killing that culture. They are creating domesticated slaves. And they're doing a great job of it. And, you know, the point you make, I see articles every few weeks about child brings Army man to school, arrested. Child brings toy Star Wars gun. It was less than 2 inches long. Remember that one a couple months ago? And the new one, he had an Army man on his hat. Just, you know, and so they were freaking out. And the image is the government's got all these guns. They're armed to the teeth. You know, they can beat you, kill you whenever they want. But you can't even have the image of a gun. And I see reports constantly about junior high students who will write an essay, and it'll have zombies or wars. I mean, I wrote those in English class and got A+, and they arrest them, even though it's a fictitious school in another country in one case with zombies. And I actually got an A+ for a zombie story in middle school. I remember getting that, and the teacher picked me out to read it before the class and thought it was a great story. And because, you know, your kids see these zombie movies on TV, then you write an article about it. So it's thought crime. And if you want to know how they phase it in generationally, if you think what you see on TV and the culture is domesticated and enslaved, John, if you actually see now what's in the schools, it is like the Twilight Zone 1984. Any other points, John?
Yeah, well, when I was in high school in the early '60s, we didn't have such a thing as school police. I never seen a cop in school. And one time somebody sent off a cherry bomb in school. You know, where there used to be a big firecracker, and they got mad about it and went on the intercom and said everybody caught with a firecracker would be kicked out of school. But they didn't call the cops. They didn't call ATF. And if the guy would have got caught, he'd got kicked out for 3 days, and then your mother and dad had to come get you back in. But that was it.
Well, no, he would have been probably taken out and made to run, but that's cruel and unusual. See, they always restrict regular training and discipline that'll make us be upright, and then once we're out of control, then they totally enslave us. I mean, you know, the children's movie Pinocchio explains it all. You know, the way the system wants you to be corrupt so they can compromise you, and they would have been run around the football field until they threw up. Then they would have been given pops. Then they would have been sent home for 3 days, and then their parents would have whooped their butt.
But one more thing before I go, Alex. Talking about guns, I remember going with my dad to a pawn shop back in about 1959. He wanted to buy a deer rifle. He went in there and he picked out the gun he wanted. He put the money on the counter, walked out, and that was it. You could if you wanted a deer rifle or a gun, you could send a check in the mail and deliver it right to your house.
To Sears Roebuck. I hear you, John. My son's reading a book, A Boy and the Big Bear or something. It's published 1954. And the whole thing is the 6-year-old kid out hunting bears with his rifle. And then he finds a baby bear and decides not to kill it and then raises it and then has trouble with it. But the point is, you know, that was an award-winning book. It says it won the National Award for Schools and was put in schools nationwide in 1954. And now, I mean, this book is like completely alien. They want us domesticated. Then they have select paramilitary guilds where you're allowed to be macho and allowed to be manly, but it's a false distortion of a bunch of soft weaklings in commando outfits beating up women. I mean, I've seen these cops, folks, and they are pathetic. I mean, they're just weak. You look in their eyes. A real warrior, somebody who's really strong, wants to fight other warriors. I mean, it's just totally sick. It's really a bunch of limp-wristed people in big fancy battle outfits, and they just love cornering a woman and beating the hell out of her. And I'm not saying all police are like that. You can tell a cop. I mean, it seems like the bigger and the tougher and the meaner the cop is, the nicer they are. It's always these, I hate to say it, it's like these liberal cops. They're just women cops. And I'm not saying all women cops, but I've noticed it. They got something to prove. They're scared. They're cowards. They're domesticated. I mean, if you're not really strong and you don't want to protect people, you shouldn't be a cop. And if you like to abuse people, you don't need to be a cop. But instead, they want the sicko abusers. They want the people that have problems. They want the people that are wimps. They don't want people that are peacemakers, that are peace officers, who are negotiators. I hate to use a popular culture example, but was Matt Dillon out just, because that's a good example of I've actually read the histories of a good sheriff. I mean, it's a little overblown, and, he was in a lot more, in the fictitious Gunsmoke than a sheriff really would be. But in some cases, there were some sheriffs that were in that type of action. But the issue is he was out walking softly, carrying a big stick, not looking for trouble, being friendly, knew how to negotiate with people, but that if he had to be rough, he would be. That's what you're supposed to have in a lawman, not just some arrogant wimp who, if somebody looks at him wrong, or some old lady scared when 10 cops stomp into her house because she calls an ambulance, and some old lady who's, low on oxygen, dying, and feels absolutely horrible and has organs failing, is grumpy and barely talks some trash to the cops, so they taser her and make her go into convulsions. I mean, you shouldn't be a cop if you can't handle, an old lady got smart mouth with me, tasered. If you can't handle the heat, get out of the kitchen. It's a bunch of look, these are all spoiled, rotten kids who mommy gave them everything, and they were bullies in school, and now they're a cop, and everybody's got to bow down to them. I'm not doing it, okay? I'm done. I know thugs when I see it. I know cowards when I see it, and I've had enough. Let me see. We got Mike in New Orleans, Kathy, George, Ronnie, and many others. The toll-free number to join us is 800-259-9231, and I'll get to more of your calls come up in an hour. An hour is only 14 minutes away. I need to go ahead and get into all the news, and I almost want to cut up these pieces I do live here on air and then post it on prisonplanet.tv as vignettes, as separate thoughts, so that it's not just caught in the wider stream of calls and guests and my ramblings, because the information I'm about to cover here is just of import that is so great. It's even mind-blowing to me, somebody who just constantly studies this information. But let me go ahead and just note here, this is extremely important. I'm about to go through news, and this is extremely, extremely important information that you are about to hear. Dollar should be replaced as international standard, UN report says. And if the guys give me a document cam shot, I will show you this article for prisonplanet.tv viewers. The dollar is an unreliable international currency and should be replaced by a more stable system, the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs said in a report released Tuesday. So this is a CIA, OSS, Pentagon-created system in 1945 to dissolve other nations and bring them under the corporate governance. And here we are 60 years later, 60-plus years later, and they're saying dissolve our currency. Now remember, this is a creation of our traitorous government. The use of the dollar for international trade came under increasing scrutiny when the U.S. economy fell into recession. The dollar has proven not to be a stable store of value, which is a requisite for a stable reserve currency, the report said. Many countries in Asia in particular have been building up massive dollar reserves. As a result, those countries' currencies have become undervalued, decreasing their ability to import goods from abroad. The World Economic and Social Survey 2010 is supporting a proposal long advocated by the International Monetary Fund to create a standardized international system for liquidity transfer. Now, what is the G20 calling for? What is Geithner calling for? What is Goldman Sachs calling for? What are the real corporate spies? They're not Ruskies, they're not Chi-Coms, they're corporate spies. And it's almost like we're Native Americans and these corporate spies are smallpox. We have no immunity to them. All we're worried about is, foreign enemies wearing turbans, and so we can't see it. Now, decades ago, the globalists said they would do this. They would first destroy and debase our currency, use the devaluation of it to fund their planetary regime. They would then implode the dollar and create a global reserve currency owned and run by private banking consortium, the elite banks. And now they've got the Financial Reform Act, which the Washington Post admits fully takes over our banks. That is real banks down the street from you, as the Texas Banking Association said 2 months ago. This is a global corporate banking takeover of real banks that is taking place right now. So it's a global consolidation. And as they called for at the Copenhagen Treaty last year, for the environment, they wanted an SDR and global carbon tax. Now for the oil spill, they want the carbon tax. For every reason under the